and welcome to another episode of Game, Develop, Repeat. I'm your host, Chris, and in today's episode, I want to talk about how we can take a game that we love, a game that's enjoyable, well-designed, and really satisfying to play, and just twist one little knob and ruin the game for ourselves. I want to talk about how we can take a phenomenal game, change one element of the gameplay or the story or what have you, and turn it into a game that we really do not enjoy. So we'll go through a few hypothetical scenarios. I want to take a few different games and kind of play with them conceptually and go, would this ruin this game for you or not? The answer is going to be different for everybody, but I've got a few ideas that I think would really ruin a fantastic game. And then we're going to look at that and we're going to say, what does that teach us about game design? That's the path for today. So let's play that intro theme and then get into it. Let's start by ruining Skyrim. What could we do to Skyrim that immediately makes this game an insufferable experience? What could we do to Skyrim that makes it so unenjoyable with just a simple change? I'm talking like a couple lines of code. I'm not talking about a huge change. I'm talking quick and easy. To me, all you got to do to really make Skyrim miserable is make every single line of dialogue in the entire game unskippable. Make it so that you cannot skip a single word that one of the NPCs says to you. Oh, you've already been to this blacksmith before? You've already heard everything they have to say? Oh, that's too bad. You're listening to it again. They're greeting you the same way again. Same inflection, same voice actor, same cadence, same everything. And you got to listen to all 5 seconds of it every time you go, oh, you clicked out too early and you want to sell something still? Guess you're going to click on that again and listen for another 5 seconds. Oh, you accidentally clicked talk when you meant to click back? Guess you're listening to them, right? That is a game ruiner. And what is the underlying concept behind this to me? It's a couple things. One is like unskippable filler content, stuff that you are just, or repetitive unskippable content, stuff that you are forced to deal with. The loading screen for combat in Final Fantasy IX is the most egregious version of this that I have ever seen make it through to a game. Hold on, never mind. Starfield. Starfield drove me crazy with this kind of thing. Loading screen after loading screen after loading screen. I suppose that's a different problem, and we can approach that from a different angle, but my God, unskippable things that just slow you down, that pull you out of the flow, or that just force you to experience something that you've already experienced before, those can break a game so quickly. Imagine that the starting screen on a platformer takes like, let's say it's a game where you die repeatedly, and the startup for the level takes like 5 seconds. Super Meat Boy, but every respawn takes 5 seconds. You're not playing that game. You're not playing Super Meat Boy anymore. You're done with Super Meat Boy. If every time you die, you got to wait 5 seconds, you're done. There's no way you're playing that game. I don't think so, right? Stuff like that. Like that is these little adjustments. And it doesn't even have to be that brutal. I use 5 seconds as this exaggerated example, but like something like Super Hexagon gets you straight back into the action, right? And that's a huge part of the game design. That's a huge part of the gameplay loop. You're in there quick. You're not dealing with these big chunks of just like waiting, of just like, okay, that gameplay loop was really quick, so I need to get right back into it really quickly. And then with something like Skyrim, if you have to listen to this same exact voice inflection, this same exact delivery, the same intonation, the same dialogue over and over and over and over for something that you're like, I've already heard this, you're going to lose your mind. You're not going to be able to stand it, right? Now let's talk about another flaw, because I think I've driven the point home on that. Unskippable filler is rough. There's a million different examples. We could talk about like Assassin's Creed, but you have to do every single little side quest thing no matter what before you can progress the story. It's like, which is kind of how I play those games sometimes, so maybe I'm ruining that kind of game for myself. But like forced completionism, right? That's not great. Unless all your content is really good and you're very confident that every single player that will ever play your game wants to experience every single piece of content that you provide, it's a dangerous decision, right? Okay, let's move forward. What's the next idea? What's the next thing that we can ruin for somebody? You know what? Let's take another beloved title and apply this next concept to it. Let's take Celeste. Celeste is a marvelous game. What if Celeste had really bad default controls? Unrebindable controls, let's say. You can't rebind the controls on Celeste, and the defaults are bad. They're like all the way across the keyboard. They're unnatural. They're confusing. You have to hold one button while you hit another one in order to jump. The dash button is just like in the weirdest place, right? If the key bindings are confusing and uncontrollable and not customizable, that can shatter a game for people. And this is worth keeping in mind because rebindable hotkeys, which unfortunately I did not put into my first game, rebinding hotkeys is so important because people have different needs based on what controller they're using, based on their hand size, based on disability, based on a million different things. People have different preferences. Maybe they just grew up with an Xbox versus a PlayStation. Maybe they played a lot of one particular game that used this for the cancel button all the time, and now for the rest of their life, they have a preference for this button being cancel and this button being jump and what have you. These things are important. So not providing reasonable key bindings or ways to reset them is huge. I think that's a really big one. I think that can be a really big problem. So like if you take Celeste and you make it so that jump is on like right trigger or something, right? That would be physically weird, right? Or like dash is click down on the joypad. What do you call that? The joystick, excuse me. Dash is like click down on both joysticks simultaneously. Suddenly this game is brutal. And you can see this explored in any Bennett Foddy game, in any Rage game. Those games are an exploration of bad controls. Like if you flip this on its head, if you make Bennett Foddy's Getting Over It into a game about like really smooth controls and like extremely clear, strong control schemes, and you know exactly what the character is going to do every time that he does something, suddenly that game isn't fun because it's no longer about intentionally bad controls and frustrating you and all of this stuff, right? So this can kind of flip on its head. Sometimes an intentionally bad thing can be really good if it's designed correctly. Now, here's a different angle. Let's say you take a game like, maybe we use Skyrim again. Yeah, let's use Skyrim. Let's say you take Skyrim and you market it by focusing on every single dark scene in the game, every little scary moment. You focus on every moment that's a little spooky, a little scary. And that's your marketing, and that's your pitch. And everywhere that you're showing this game, you're showing darkness, you're showing bad lighting or dark, spooky lighting. You're showing all this stuff that makes the player think, ooh, this is going to be intense. This is going to be scary. This is going to be in the darkness. There's going to be things around the corner. And then the game comes out, and everybody's expectation was for this scary game. So now everybody who buys this game is looking for something scary, and they're getting something completely different. They're getting this cool open world thing, and they're like, yeah, this is good, but this isn't what I was expecting at all. That's another way to ruin a game experience for somebody. Like, we forget that the marketing is part of the game, but if you sell somebody a spooky game and then what they get is not a spooky game, that can ruin it, right? That can make it into a bad game for them. And that can really harm the reputation of a game over a very long period of time. So like you can really mess things up if you depict the game as very different from what it is. Just because you're not communicating clearly. I think the big picture, interestingly enough, is that bad communication ruins games, right? These control schemes that don't make sense. It's I don't know if it counts as bad communication, but it's poor understanding, right? It's failing to maybe it's a failure of communicating why your control scheme is the way that it is, or maybe it's just a failure to understand the player's needs. So that's sort of a form of communication. Maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but unskippable stuff is like disrespecting the player for sure. And saying you have to experience everything in this game every single time. It's kind of a forced conversation. It's like somebody's trying to kind of edge their way out of the room, right? They're trying to get out of the room, and you're like, no, you have to listen to all of this every single time. That's definitely a bad communication style. And then bad marketing, of course. Now, there's another thing that ties into all of this, which is waiting. If anybody played Final Fantasy IX, you might know what I'm about to pick on. The beginning of every single battle in Final Fantasy IX has this extremely long load up. It's got this slow, it takes forever, and it's like a loading screen problem, right? Constant waiting for no reason. Repeated waiting, loading screens. This is like the one huge thing that Skyrim got a lot of flack for when it came out, was the loading screens were crazy. This is why I don't like Starfield, by the way. I'm constantly going into UI and going to a different loading screen, and then going to UI and going to a different loading screen, and watching a freaking video to go to a different place. I'm like, I want to do something that takes 5 minutes, and I got to take 15 minutes to get to the place to do the thing, and then the thing isn't even climactic, right? Not to just go off on a tangent about Starfield, but Jesus, that game was frustrating for me. You know, it's just like it's just a loading screen menu, loading screen, Freudian slip there. Jeez. It was just a loading screen and menu simulator. And like, there's good things about the game, sure, but I couldn't do it. It's one of my pet peeves. I can't deal with that much wait time. I can't deal with that much just like, okay, here we are. Let's just wait. Let's just hold off. Here's one. I don't even have this one written down, but let's talk about this really quickly. Unresponsive controls. Unresponsive controls, depending on the genre of game, right? That can be... Okay, how do I make this a little bit more broad? Or how do I come up with an exact example of this? Let's say the game tells you that clicking A is going to attack. And then when you click A, it jumps and then attacks. That's confusing. What if clicking A just jumps? The game giving you conflicting instructions is what I'm trying to get at. And if the controls feel like you're supposed to hit this button to counter at this exact time, and instead the counter window is actually like a split second after the screen flashes, or like it's not timed correctly. Does that make sense? There are things in fighting games that drive me crazy because I feel like I'm seeing the correct timing to counter something. And maybe I'm just slow, maybe I'm just bad at games, but like I feel like I hit it at the right time and then it doesn't hit at the right time. This is why Celeste is so good, because it gives you all these buffer frames and it always feels like you're doing it right, and yet it's still somehow a challenging game. Extremely impressive, right? I guess making the player feel like they're being treated unfairly, making the player feel as though they did something right and that they are getting punished for it, that can be rough. I don't think that's like a full-on disaster decision, but I think that can be a very common game frustration. And if that's embedded throughout everything in the game, then that's a huge issue. Here's the last one before we move forward a little bit and talk about lessons we can take from this, although I think it might be a little self-explanatory in some cases. User interface, because we've been talking about communication just a little bit here. User interface problems can be wild. User interface can be so rough sometimes because it is how you are communicating with the player. It is how you are showing the player what they are able to do in the game. What can be interacted with, what can't be interacted with. What options are there for your class? What options are there not? I ran into one the other day. I was playing a game. I opened up a game called Drakensang. I might be mispronouncing that. I probably am, even though I took German. Drakensang has this button next to the character. It looks like there's like 3 classes you can choose from. There's a button that looks like it's to change your character's appearance, but you click that button and it shows you 4 more classes, and then you click the button again and it shows you more classes. It's in the wrong spot. It looks like it's supposed to change your character model or turn your character model or something, because of, modern sensibilities about like being able to customize how your character looks, which I guess you weren't able to do in this game, which was released in like 2008, I think. I don't know. The game feels, I think maybe I'm getting old, but the game feels a little older than it is. I'm not sure how else to say that, but it seems incredible. That little UI choice is confusing. That little bit made me almost miss the fact that this game has like 15 classes to choose from or something crazy like that. I thought it only had 3 classes. I thought it only had like warrior, soldier, and archer. And I was like, oh, okay, simple, whatever. There's probably a bunch of customization later in the game. No. I missed out on all the magic classes, all the elves, the dwarves. I didn't even see that they existed. And it's not a change race button either. It's like a confusing thing. There's like multiple pages of the humans, and then there's like some elves on one page and some dwarves, and then there's a single page dedicated to an Amazon and a single page dedicated to a pirate. So yeah, a little bit of a tangent there. I'm excited about that game. These little design decisions can make players completely miss something. Let's imagine how we could do this with a game that we like. How could we ruin the design of a beloved game? How about this? What if you take Breath of the Wild and you just get rid of the fact that it shows you where the button is on your controller on screen? Breath of the Wild is very, very good about this. I love this about that game because I am not used to playing on a Nintendo Switch. And so it's showing me physically, it shows you this little gamepad indicator, and it shows you where the button is that you need to press when you're interacting with something. That's huge. Imagine that the game just gets rid of that indicator entirely. Maybe it replaces it with just an exclamation point over your head to be like, hey, do something. Or maybe there's just no indicator anymore. They just get rid of the indicator. How many games would be ruined by getting rid of an interaction indicator? In fact, how many old games are there where you remember walking around the corners of the room and just clicking A over or X over and over to see if there's something you can interact with and pick up? Just getting rid of that little shiny note on the screen somewhere, or that little exclamation point, or that little thing that tells you, hey, check out this. Hey, see if there's something here. Removing that feature could ruin some games. Removing that feature could do some serious damage. Making it harder to see where screen transitions are. That has made sections of certain games extremely frustrating or difficult for me, right? I had that problem in a scene in Final Fantasy VIII. I've had that problem with the game Summoner. There are moments in games where it's like, I just got to hit the select button, and it's going to give me that little arrow that shows me where all the areas that I can leave the room are, right? Like, features like that can be very, very impactful. But now we're talking about how to improve something more than how to ruin it. I think removing all interaction indicators would be pretty bad. I think that could really wreck certain games, especially like adventure games, point and click kind of stuff. That could be a major detriment. Well, let's get into what we can learn from all of this. Here are some broad lessons I think we can take away from this conversation. The first one is communicate clearly with your players, and just in life in general, right? But you can do something strange with your control schemes as long as you make it very clear, very obvious, and then it becomes intuitive and it makes sense, right? You can do something strange with your game as long as the player understands what you're doing and is like entering this with the right frame of mind. A good example of this is the game Gothic. Well, actually, a good example of this done wrong is the game Gothic. I picked up Gothic the other day, and I had to Google how the control scheme worked. I'm sure it was probably in the physical manual, so this is probably just an age issue. But the control scheme works on this strange system where you hold down control, the button control, and then press W or press forward to like pick things up. So like your movement is also your pickup. In the modern era, we just press Q or E or F or whatever to interact with random objects. No, in this game you like change modes to interact with stuff, and like then you change modes to go into combat, and it's very odd. but I like it, but it wasn't communicated clearly to me. I think I'm going to dig it a lot. I'm really excited about playing that game because as soon as I started to understand the control scheme, I was like, oh no, I like this. This is weird, but this is cool. Maybe I've just played too many games, but I'm excited about that particular one. So clear communication of stuff like that. I couldn't even find that in the options menu. I had to do a whole thing. I had to go Googling. I had to leave the game. I almost got frustrated. And then I was like, wait, this game is like legendary. So I need to look into this because people have been, this is the kind of game that I kind of want to play. You know, I'm looking at this and I'm going, oh, this is exciting for me. I'm willing to put in the effort to figure out how to work this. It's an old game. Sometimes they're going to have some weird quirks. But yeah, communicating clearly, like, and hold on. Let me be really clear about something. Communicating a lot is not the same as communicating clearly. Saying a lot of words does not equal clear communication. Do not give someone 3 paragraphs to explain to them that you just have to press E to interact. You know what I'm saying? Don't do it. Don't find a better way. That's bad design. I say this. I do a podcast where I just talk for 30 minutes straight, so clearly I fall in the category of more words, not less, but I think in game design, the less you're making somebody read, the better, unless you're in a very specific genre, right? Anyway, we'll move forward from there. Next big lesson, have multiple people test it because they're all going to have their different perspective, and some people are going to have their own pet peeve, and some people are going to go, this is really frustrating. And some people aren't going to notice it. And if somebody notices something that's really, really frustrating, there's probably more than one person that's getting frustrated by that. If your sample size is like 5 people and one of them notices something and it's driving them insane, unless you know that they're like very, very outside of the norm on that particular thing, you should probably fix the thing, right? Like you get multiple people in there. You've been drowning in your own project. You don't know what's good anymore. I mean, you do, but also you don't. Like you're used to the quirks of your own game. You're used to these weird filler chunks of time that you don't even realize are filler. You're accepting of it because you made it. Like, have other people look at it. Just have them look at it. I'm not saying you got to do what other people say to do. I'm just saying they might point something out that you're not thinking about. You might go, oh, you are forced to listen to that entire dialogue line every time and it's at a place where you die often. That's interesting because I've never played that chunk of the game that many times in a row because I've only had to play once through for bug testing. I have never died there recently because I don't die much because I've been playing my own game forever, right? Have other people test it. Next one, kind of related. Don't make assumptions about the player's mindset, right? This goes into having other people test it, but if you're assuming that the player wants to listen to every single line of dialogue in your game, you're not taking into account the fact that they might love the game and they might be replaying it. You're not taking into account the fact that the player might need to skip through this dialogue so they can get to a freaking save point because something is going on. You're not taking into account that they just don't care about the dialogue and they're here for the gameplay and they find your dialogue unenjoyable. Sorry, they're just not into it, but they do like the game otherwise, so let them skip it even on the first time through, right? Don't make them skip it on accident, make sure there's like a figure that out somehow. That's probably a really hard design decision in general, if we're being honest, but don't assume that they're going into it wanting what you want them to want, Respect the fact that people want different things out of games. They might not want what you think they want. Yeah? And then another one, this kind of ties it back to the very first thing. Don't waste people's time. Don't do it unless they want to waste their time, right? If your game is in a genre that is all about grinding and wasting time and whatever, great, cool, have at it. But don't waste their time. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need like a 20-second load screen here. You don't need like, well, maybe you do, but you don't need to have like these really long chunks of time within repetitive behaviors. Entering the shopkeeper menu should be quick. It should not be a whole dialogue tree that you have to navigate through in like you shouldn't have like 4 dialogue options to get to the freaking shopkeeper's trade menu, right? You shouldn't have okay, there was a game I was playing the other day that I liked that got ruined for me because of the menu interactions. That's why we're doing this whole episode. I'm not going to call the game out. But it was a fishing game and I like it. And the menus are all like one menu you can only close out of by pressing start, and then all the rest of the menus you close out of by pressing B. And then there's a menu where you use the left joystick, the right joystick, and the D-pad all for different things. And it's just such infuriating design. And then that ends up feeling like it's wasting my time because every time I'm taking the extra like 2 seconds to be wrong, clicking the incorrect button and then click a different thing. And I'm like, oh no, of course. Yeah, no, it's start to exit that menu, right? Don't do stuff. Don't make the player feel stupid. All right? Don't make your player feel really dumb because they're not subscribing to the same like design philosophy as you when your design philosophy is bad. I'm sorry. I don't know how else to put that. It drives me crazy when I can't exit out of a menu by pressing B when every other menu let me exit by pressing B, and B is not assigned to any other button. Things like that, playtesting. Just playtesting. just somebody would have told you. Somebody would have told you about that. Please, I hope somebody would have told you. Be consistent, I guess, and don't waste people's time. Don't waste people's time. Don't make people go through 6 seconds of loading every time they enter combat. Not unless you absolutely have to, right? Like there may be situations. There may be a point where you go, "Oh no, I've designed this game so poorly and now there's all these resources that need to load and like there's nothing I can do to fix this. We're so close to that. It's just going to be a 5-second load on every battle." Well, it is going to be a problem. So be aware of that. But like, please God, avoid that kind of thing. Don't force people to listen to dialogue every time. Make your cutscenes skippable so that people can replay your game and enjoy it, right? I'm interested in what other ways we can come up with that would just ruin a game, that would just make it terrible. Because I think this is a very short list compared to how many things there really are that you could do. I think there are probably dozens of ways, realistic ways, like not like crazy, weird, out-of-pocket stuff, but realistic ways that you could ruin a game. Like somebody could go, oh, this is a good decision, and then it just completely bombs the game. And maybe I just need to play more like very obscure titles or like old games or something to find these, to track them down. But if you have more, let me know, because this I'm actually very interested in. This is appealing to me. If you want to let me know, you can email me, anxiousbuddhagames@gmail.com, or you can jump into the Discord and hit me up there. You'll be able to find me on my Discord channel. There's a link below. I also do the Twitch stream thing. But those are all places you can tell me what your thoughts are on like ways to just mess up one of your favorite games. Okay, let's wrap this up with some interesting questions. I got 2 questions just to close this episode out and get us thinking about game design for this week. Get us into that mindset, get us into that space. First question is, how could you ruin one of your favorite games? I would say if I took Stardew Valley and I limited the inventory severely, if I just like cut all the inventory in half or removed the ability to upgrade the amount of things that you're holding, like remove the ability to hold more stuff, I think that could do a lot of damage. I think that could really harm that game. I think there's not much more you need to do than that to take that game from incredible to like pretty frustrating. This just shows how much these little details matter, doesn't it? Does that ring true to you? Do you think that if Stardew Valley had half the inventory space that it has, it would be miserable or not? What do you think? Okay, maybe not miserable, but I think it would be a worse game for it. The game is still really good. I wonder how much you would have to limit it before it reaches the point of like, oh, this game would be amazing if it weren't for this one critical flaw. All right, next question. How could you fix a game with one fatal flaw, right? My go-to on this is always a Final Fantasy game. I think all the old Final Fantasy games have like one fatal flaw, right? Like that's like the genre. There's like a story moment in Final Fantasy VIII that I find insufferable, even though I love the game and I find its world and story really interesting. There's the loading screen thing in Final Fantasy IX. These are the ones I always jump to when I'm thinking about a fatal flaw. The indie game that I played recently that I'm not going to name drop about fishing, I would just fix the menu and I would change a little UI stuff in the menus. It was a big adjustment though, because that whole menu system is designed really weird. It's like over designed in a direction that I don't like. But I would fix like the B button to exit out thing, you know? Like I would just change little things like that. Like this button now does this, done, fixed. But what about like a big title? I don't know. Final Fantasy IX, load into battles quicker. That's the easiest one, right? But I guess that was probably a technical limitation at the time. Final Fantasy VIII junction system, just redesign it from the ground up. Just cut out the whole junction system and make something really simple instead. I don't know. Or just change drawing in Final Fantasy VIII. Like make it so that you draw magic once and then you're done. Turn it into like a battery system somehow. Like you draw magic completely and then from then on, whenever you use it, it like automatically fills back up over time or something. Anyway, that's everything I've got for you. Think about those questions. How could you ruin your favorite game? How could you fix a game with one fatal flaw? Normally, I give a tip at this point for myself that might inspire you too. But my tip this week is that some weeks you don't need a tip. Some weeks are just weeks. Sometimes you just do what you're going to do and you just keep moving forward. And I think that's what this week needs to be. That's everything I've got for you this time. I'll catch you in the next one. I mentioned it earlier, but I've got the email. You can email me. We've got the Discord. I've got the Twitch channel. I do have a Ko-fi too. There's probably going to be some changes coming to that. I think we might be about to start a big project. It depends on how the voting goes on this next project that we're starting up. But I think we might be about to switch into some harder game development stuff. I've been doing monthly projects, monthly challenges. That's why I haven't been talking about my development much. I've been doing monthly things. We just finished one. We might be starting a big project. We'll see. We'll see how the vote goes. That's everything. I will catch you all in the next one. Until then, get out there, make some stuff, and have fun with it. I'll see you. Bye-bye.